Something is going terribly wrong for Russia in Donetsk. Men are being pushed forward under the banner of a spring campaign that was supposed to prove Russian strength. Instead, it is exposing Russian weakness in the harshest way possible. I'm Walter Benson, and this is my channel, Walter Benson. If you value serious reporting, like this video, subscribe, comment with your view, and share this report with others. Now, to the story. Moscow claims Ukraine is close to collapse. It says Donetsk will soon fall, then the wider Donbas, and that the road ahead is already decided. But the battlefield is telling a different story. Russian troops are dying at a pace that shocks even close observers of this war. The offensive that was meant to bring momentum is instead turning into a graveyard. And nowhere is that more visible than in the one region the Kremlin wants most. Putin's public line is simple. Russia is advancing. Ukraine is weakening. Negotiations should happen on Moscow's terms, because the outcome is already obvious. But that picture breaks apart when the numbers from Donetsk are examined closely. According to Pavlo Polisa from Ukraine's presidential office, Russia is now losing 316 soldiers for every square kilometer it takes in Donetsk. That figure alone is staggering. It means the cost of each small gain is becoming almost impossible to justify, even by the brutal standards of this war. A year earlier, the loss rate in Donetsk was about 160 per square kilometer, with a lower average across the wider front. In other words, the Russian military is now paying roughly double for ground that brings little real advantage. These are not signs of a force moving toward decisive victory. They are signs of a military being consumed by its own offensive. The scale becomes even darker when these losses are set against actual progress on the ground. Russia may still be inching forward in parts of Donetsk, but those advances are not delivering meaningful operational results. For 6 months, the Kremlin has sacrificed large numbers of troops without gaining anything that changes the wider balance in the region. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, Russian losses reportedly passed 90,000 men. More than 35,000 of those losses came in Donetsk. That is the region now feared most by the very soldiers sent to attack it. The battlefield there has become a symbol of exhaustion and dread. Units are pushed in, broken apart, and replaced by more men who often arrive with poor training and even less confidence. The offensive is still described as strength from Moscow, but to the men entering those assaults, Donetsk increasingly looks like a place where orders lead only in one direction. March revealed just how badly this campaign is stalling. Reports indicated that Russia made almost no territorial gains across the front during that month, seizing only about 23 square kilometers. That was far below even the poor results seen in January and February. Yet March was the very month when the spring offensive was supposed to build speed. Instead, it drove Russian forces into a standstill. At the same time, Moscow was still trying to sound confident. President Zelensky said Russia issued an ultimatum at the end of March, demanding that Ukraine leave the Donbas within 2 months or face full seizure by force. But threats lose weight when the battlefield no longer supports them. Russia is trying to negotiate from a posture of strength, while bleeding heavily for tiny symbolic gains. The deeper this fight continues in Donetsk, the clearer the pattern becomes. Moscow's words are expansive. Its actual military position is far more fragile. Then comes the brutal arithmetic. Russia still has roughly 7,000 square kilometers of Donetsk left to capture, including the heavily defended urban line that stands between its current positions and any claim of full control. If Russian forces continue losing troops at the current rate of 316 casualties per square kilometer, the human price would be catastrophic. By that calculation, taking the rest of Donetsk would cost more than 2.2 million soldiers. That number is almost beyond belief, yet it follows directly from the rate now being reported. For perspective, Russia has already lost more than 1.3 million troops over more than 4 years of war, according to Ukrainian estimates. So even if one debates exact totals, the trend is unmistakable. The cost of pushing deeper into Donetsk is becoming historically severe. And still, Moscow acts as if it holds the stronger hand. That gap between rhetoric and reality is widening with every failed assault. This pattern is not new in one sense. When battlefield pressure builds, the Kremlin often turns to political theater. Palliser argued that Russia tends to increase demands and impose deadlines when events at the front are not going its way. That appears to be happening again. Moscow speaks of momentum, while its gains remain minimal and largely symbolic. There are tactical movements in some areas, but no operational breakthrough that changes the campaign. Even in neighboring Luhansk, Russia has repeatedly claimed full control, only for those claims to collapse under scrutiny. Small pockets still resist, and the need to repeat victory claims says a great deal about the insecurity behind them. The message is crafted for impression, not proof. And behind that message sits a more dangerous development. The issue is no longer only that Russia is losing too many men for too little land. It is that a larger shift inside those losses is making the crisis much worse. That shift is the growing number of Russian troops being killed outright. Military analyst Andrew Perpetua, reviewing large volumes of combat footage and open-source material, pointed to a grim pattern. March 2026 marked the fourth straight month of exceptionally high Russian killed-in-action rates. Over that 4-month period, the number of Russian dead rose to levels not previously seen in such sustained form. In March 2025, reported Russian KIA stood at 4,113. In March 2026, that figure jumped to 5,771. That is roughly a 40% increase, and it came during a season when losses would normally ease as winter conditions fade. Instead, spring brought even more death. This matters because dead soldiers do not return to the line. They cannot recover, rotate back, or fill depleted units. A military can survive heavy injury rates more easily than surging death rates. And in Donetsk, that distinction is starting to define the entire campaign. The reasons behind this deterioration are multiple, and together they paint a picture of profound dysfunction. Russia's military has been hit by communication disruption and deep internal corruption. Reports have described units thrown into confusion after technology losses and command failures. At the same time, abuse within the system continues to erode morale. Some commanders have reportedly demanded bribes to keep men away from frontline assaults. Poorly trained soldiers have been sent forward with almost no chance of success. In some cases, the very structure meant to sustain combat has instead fed despair. Recruitment has not solved the problem. March was reportedly the fourth straight month in which Russian volunteer recruitment failed to keep pace with casualties. Between January and March 2026, Russia recruited fewer men than it lost. That is a warning sign of strategic importance. A war of attrition becomes far harder to sustain when replacements no longer cover battlefield losses. All of this brings us back to the heart of the problem in Donetsk. Russia is not simply attacking open ground, it is advancing toward one of the most heavily prepared defensive systems in the war. The obstacle can be described in 2 words: fortress belt. This is the arc of major cities blocking Russia from reaching the administrative line that would allow Putin to declare victory in Donetsk. Sloviansk, Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk, and Kostiantynivka form that line. Years of slow Russian progress have given Ukraine time to strengthen these places extensively. Of the 4, Russia has only managed to move close to Kostiantynivka, and even there, it has not entered the city. The others remain beyond reach for any serious assault. Russian drones and artillery can strike near them, but striking and taking are very different things. These cities are not just urban targets. They are fortified barriers built to absorb attacks and drain the force behind them. The first assaults of the spring offensive already showed what this means in practice. Russia reportedly lost more than 5,000 troops, along with large amounts of armor and equipment, in only a few days of attacks tied to this defensive zone. And the pattern has continued. Russian infiltration groups approach, are detected, and are broken apart before they can build momentum. Ukraine has shown throughout the war that it can hold strategically important settlements for long periods under pressure. Chasiv Yar resisted for nearly 2 years of Russian assault. Pokrovsk became another symbol of stubborn defense. In the Kharkiv region, Ukraine not only defended key ground, but in places pushed Russian forces back. Now, imagine that same defensive determination applied to 4 larger urban strongholds linked together in a single system. That is the challenge Russia is facing in Donetsk. It is not entering a breakthrough zone. It is moving toward a layered defensive machine designed to punish every step forward. Ukraine has also shaped the wider battlefield to make that fortress line even deadlier. Counter-offensive pressure in other directions has forced Russia to divert manpower away from Donetsk. That weakens assaults at the very place where Moscow needs strength most. At the same time, drones have transformed the region into a constant kill zone. By early 2026, drones were being credited with the majority of battlefield casualties across the war. If that trend holds in Donetsk, then most of the 316 losses per square kilometer are likely coming from drone warfare alone. Ukraine uses short-range FPV strikes against assault groups and medium-range drones against the Russian rear, hitting command posts, operator hubs, and ammunition points. That creates pressure both at the front and behind it. Russian troops move under surveillance almost all the time. Once spotted, they are attacked quickly. The result is relentless attrition. It is one more reason the promise of a rapid Russian breakthrough now looks detached from reality. What is collapsing in Donetsk is more than an offensive. It is another layer of the myth Putin has tried to preserve since the first days of the invasion. Russia was supposed to overwhelm Ukraine quickly. That failed. Then came new versions of the same claim, each one promising that victory was finally near. Now the claim is that Donetsk is close to falling. But the numbers tell a colder story. Russia is losing men at extreme rates, gaining little, and moving toward fortifications that could make those losses even worse. Mobilization remains politically dangerous for the Kremlin, yet covert methods are no longer enough to hide the strain. Donetsk is becoming the measure of that failure. If you want more serious analysis, subscribe to my channel, Walter Benson. Comment with your thoughts and share this video with others. Because for Russia in Donetsk, the deeper this war goes, the less the ending looks like victory, and the more it looks like a reckoning still unfinished.